Okay, looks like everyone's connected. We'll get started. So, welcome to Sharing Alumni Advice Wednesdays with the Student Alumni Association. Tonight is our entrepreneurship event. Thanks to everyone for joining us tonight as our incredible alumni tell us about their career paths and their entrepreneurship journey tonight after graduating from UMass. We want this to be a really conversational event, so please feel free to turn on your cameras if you feel comfortable. Use the raise hand function on the bottom of the screen to ask a question live to one of our panelists once we get started. Also, just a quick heads up, this meeting is being recorded. So to begin, start off with some introductions. I'll start off. My name is Hamza Shazad. I am a senior computer science major here at UMass. I'm also the Alumni Relations Coordinator for the Student Alumni Association. And now I'll turn it over to Sam, our other host, to introduce himself.
Yeah, thank you, Hamza. Hey everyone, my name is Sam Morel, and I'm a senior electrical engineering here at UMass. And along with that, I'm also the Vice President of Training Development for SAA. I just want to remind everyone, if you want to, you can actually send your questions in the chat, and then I'll kind of come on to the next opportunity and prompt the panelists so they can ask it or so you can ask it. But either way, just feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat. Next, let's do some instructions for the panelists. Panelists, please feel free to introduce yourselves. Try and include your major at UMass, your current job, just kind of a brief description of what you do on a day-to-day basis. Anthony, would you mind going first?
Sure. Anthony G. Graduated from computer science in 1990. Went to work at AT&T and a technology think tank, and then moved into getting an MBA, and then working on Wall Street for a while, and then starting a venture capital firm. And now I kind of do a mix between sort of venture capital and real estate development. We develop what we call entrepreneurial spaces. So we'll get into that more later on.
All right, awesome. Cheryl, do you mind going next?
Sure. I'm Cheryl Kaplan. I graduated in 1994. I majored in fashion marketing in the consumer sciences program. And while at UMass, I started my retail career with a Gap intern program, and then sort of started in traditional retail. And then after my first job in a very traditional department store, I realized that big companies weren't for me and I wanted to do my own thing. And so I started working for a bunch of smaller venture retail brands, and then founded a couple of e-commerce companies, one of which I'm at today, called MGEMI, which we started about 6 years ago. And we'll talk more about that later.
Awesome. And then Corey, you want to close it out?
Yeah, so I'm Corey Miseldine. I graduated from UMass in 2015 with a degree in theater arts. And I worked for a while, went to Boston, worked as an actor, got sick of not getting paid, and decided that I was going to start doing Twitch streaming and YouTube, which I was already doing on the side, and kind of started launching a whole bunch of different stuff from there.
Awesome. Thanks for all your introductions. We'll start off with our first question for the night. How did your time at UMass prepare you for your journey as an entrepreneur? Anthony, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I don't know if you're ever prepared for the journey of entrepreneurship, right? But I think for me, it was really computer science just gave me a foundation in terms of problem solving. I think the world in which we live today is so. Actually, I studied computer science with a concentration in artificial intelligence. So I was ahead of my time. But I think more than anything, it gave me a foundation in sort of problem solving, understanding sort of technology, and really sort of understanding how that all fits into the world today. But I think more than anything, in terms of an entrepreneurial journey, it's really just about sort of focus, hard work, sort of finding what your passion is, and sort of really never giving up on it, quite frankly. And so, UMass is a place where you're not really coddled, and so you have to sort of figure out how to survive and thrive and amongst a very large environment. And so I think that's really the underpinning of perhaps my entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. Cheryl, did you also want to share how your time at UMass shaped your journey?
Sure. So I kind of agree that, it's a hard thing to prepare for. And I think, being an entrepreneur, you're constantly learning and growing and trying and failing and trying. And so I think a lot of that just comes with the rigor that you have to put in as a student. And for me, it was very much about finding my way in a huge school. So I went to a really small high school, and I thought I wanted this big college experience. And I realized quickly after I got to UMass that I didn't love that, being in a huge class. And, so I had to find ways to sort of make it smaller for myself. And I think some of those experiences are what helped me figure out how to then continue to do that. So, whether it was joining Greek Life and, running Rush or becoming the president, or doing an internship my senior year and managing a store on my own, those were some of the things that I did to try to, prepare myself for leadership roles that I could then have that experience going into my first job beyond college.
Yeah, and Corey, do you have any more thoughts to share on that?
Yeah, so I have to say I went to a community college first before I transferred into UMass. So I went to Hoyo Community College, which is a local college first. And then I transferred into UMass after I got my associates. And so I only had a very small amount of time at UMass. I only had the 2 years. Entering into a theater program where people had already been working with these people for so long, it was like, I need to get in there and I need to really make myself known as quickly as possible, or else I'm never going to cast. I'm never going to learn anything. I'm never going to figure this out. And the way that UMass worked for me is it was like, yeah, you're totally right. If you succeed, it's because you did that thing. If you fail, it's because you did that thing. And I love that. That's like what I look forward to. I enjoy that challenge. And I like looking back and seeing, oh, well, ultimately it's because of what I did or what I didn't do that led to that. And UMass really, really fosters that, at least when I was there, especially in the theater department.
Awesome. Yeah.
I will jump back in on that. So yeah, I think the opportunities to sort of to really develop leadership skills are really an important part of being at a place like UMass. And so and I think that in internships, right? So I think internships are very good in terms of learning what you want to do and what you don't want to do, right? Learning the environments that you want to be in and the environments that you don't want to be in. And so I think, for me, it became very clear that I didn't really want to work in a large organization. And so, and then I sort of tried smaller organizations. You just have a greater impact and greater opportunity set. And I think from students and from a student body standpoint, so actually I started a t-shirt business while I was at school. And so I used to go to different conferences and sell t-shirts. And so it wasn't really about the item itself. It was about sort of understanding this is a product people want, right? Do they want it? Do they not want it? How do you price it? How do you sell it? How do you market it? Right. And so I think just developing those skills at a very sort of early point in your life, just very important. Again, it's not sort of what you do, it's more how you do it. Mm-hmm. And UMass has that sort of the ability to sort of carve out that space, if in fact you have the drive to do it.
To jump off of that, I remember getting in trouble in school, like middle school or high school, because I used to actually go to like BJ's or Costco and I used to buy gum. Like I would buy like a ton of gum and then I'd go to school and I'd sell the gum for $1 a pack when I just bought it for like 30 cents a pack. And that was like my way of like making money. And I got suspended for that. And like just thinking back, I'm like, wow, schools aren't really designed for that, And that's really funny that I'm mentioning that, like just going and selling something and just trying to see what you can do.
Well, that's great. Yeah. Again, for all members of our audience, feel free to raise your hand, ask a question in the chat. We'll be able to ask our panelists, but we'll move on. one of the questions we received during registration from a student was, what should students know about being an entrepreneur or about starting a business with something, if they're interested in doing that, what should they expect? I think, Corey, did you want to start us off with that?
Sure. Yeah. Get a really good therapist. And no, I would make sure that you have, some type of support system, whether that's friends or other colleagues that you can kind of bounce stuff off of, because there is, for me anyways, a lot of my self-worth ends up getting tied into whether things are successful or not. And that's not really the healthiest attitude to have when you're doing a business. So that's something that I would kind of think about as you're doing it, making sure that you're taking care of yourself and kind of your own mental health, and not, if something fails, it is what it is. Move on to the next thing and don't get hung up on that.
Cheryl, did you have anything to add on to that about what students should know about starting a business or being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so many things. I mean, I guess if I were to highlight one or two, I think, people often talk about work-life balance. And I think that when you are running your own business, it never stops. And so you really have to be disciplined about finding time for yourself, for your family, or whatever it is that you want to find time for, because the work never ends. You can never sort of sit on your laurels and just assume things are going to keep going. You have to stay ahead of the competition. You have to constantly be thinking about what's next. And, I think it's a different path, and you have to really want it. It's very different than working in a big organization and being part of something than when you're running it and you're that person that people are looking to. You're constantly, you're constantly thinking about business, people, competition, everything. Now, with that being said, I love that. You have to love that. I think for me, when I have twins, when I had my twins, that's what forced me to have the discipline to stop working at times and start being with family. And I think it's really important, because otherwise your days turn into nights, and then, you just keep going. I think, being an entrepreneur, it's invigorating, but you have to remember that you don't know everything, and you have to surround yourself with really smart people. And so whether that's finding co-founders that have different skill sets than you have, or you're starting to build a team, I think it comes down to execution in most new businesses. And so finding the right people to work with that you not only enjoy working with, but that can really bring different skills and expertise, people that can wear many hats, I think is really important as well.
Yeah, I would say I'm still relatively new to this and like entrepreneurship. And, I graduated in 2015. It hasn't been that long. 2 years of those don't count, right? Because of the past 2 years. So, but like for me, I know like my entire business can be run right here. And it's always right here. Always. It's the first thing I look at when I wake up, last thing I look at when I go to bed. It's like, and I am struggling all the time with that work-life balance for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Anthony, what should students know about being an entrepreneur or being involved in entrepreneurship?
I think there are many levels of entrepreneurship, right? And so there's kind of the small business, there's a solo entrepreneur, there's the mid-level entrepreneurship where you have maybe 5 to 10 employees, and then there's sort of larger, where you could be running a multi-billion-dollar business that either you've grown or bought or become a part of. And so I think it's really there's a wide spectrum of entrepreneurship, and I think I didn't fully appreciate that sort of, I think, when I was in undergrad. And there are many ways to approach it. And so you may have an entrepreneurial opportunity, in college, or you may have an entrepreneurial opportunity when you are, mid to late career, right? In terms of, maybe you get to buy a division, you become part of that sort of process, or someone taps you to run a division that they just purchased. I mean, there's sort of many ways to look at it and approach it. And so really, really think about it in its broadest term. But I think one thing that Cheryl mentioned was, in lots of ways, it's like running anything, right? You know, in its truest form, the buck stops with you, right? So you have to be comfortable with being in that role and in that position. And you should certainly try to surround yourself with very talented people, because your team is everything. But some people aren't made for that position, right? They don't want that pressure. They don't want that constant sort of the constant eyeballs on them, and they sort of want to be in a different role, and that's fine. And so, but again, if you are comfortable in it, and sometimes you have to grow into that role, right? But it's one of when people don't get paid, right? They come to you, right? When their family is sort of need something because they rely on that paycheck, they look at you, right? And so it's both good and bad. So it can be a lot of pressure. And so I think Corey talked about having a good therapist. I think, again, it's really about how do you manage all of that, because it can be, depending upon the scale of the organization, it can be a lot to manage, and it could be overwhelming. I mean, there are times when I go to bed at 1 or 2 and wake up at 5 or 6 and have the same thought on my mind, right? And so I didn't sleep well because I was trying to figure something out, right? And so, but when you have great news, or you grow an organization and you become successful, then it's all very much rewarding, right? And it's something that you've been a significant part of building something, right? And so, I think when you're young, right, take chances, right? Literally, right? What do you have to lose? I think a lot of people think, well, I have a lot to lose. But when you are, I think in today's environment, it's important for young people to take risk. Understand, if you go out on an entrepreneurial journey and you don't succeed, it's still something great to talk about for your job, right? And so you can't lose, right? And so take those opportunities when you're young, see if that's a good fit for you, and go from there.
Those are some great responses.
Hey there, Hamza. I think we actually have a question from one of our attendees. If we can ask that next.
Sure. Yeah. So it looks like Ryan, I see your hands raised. And if anybody else has any questions, again, feel free to put in the chat, raise your hand. Ryan, feel free to ask your question.
Yeah, thank you, Hamza. My name is Ryan. I'm a sophomore here at UMass. First off, Cheryl, I'm a big fan of MGEMI. I do have my own pair of loafers from there.
Oh,
I try to wear them on
thank
any
you.
occasion that I can. And my question is just, what's the most exciting part about being an entrepreneur?
I think it's having the ability to do things. And I know that sounds really simple, but if you've ever worked in a big company, it's like you ask someone who asks someone who asks someone who, and then by the time it comes back, it's like you, like on a daily basis in a startup type entrepreneurial business, are the one or the ones that really get to do stuff. And so your hands, your exposure, you're learning so much so fast. It's like a crash course. And so I think that, it's really fun along the way, but I think maybe the best part is when you see either, in my case, your product or a company that you started that's thriving even long after you're gone. It's like a proud moment, it's like babies and they grow up and you can see them. And even if you've moved on and it's still being successful, I think that's huge. And for me, with MGEMI, the first time I was in New York in a cab and I saw not someone I knew, but a real live customer walking down the street wearing my shoes. It was really exciting. I was part of the founding team for Rulala, another e-commerce company out of Boston, and same thing, I'm not there anymore, but I watch that business, on a daily basis, and it makes me really proud that I was a part of that. So I think there comes a pride in ownership, and like, Anthony was saying, it doesn't always work, and you got to take risks and you have to be comfortable with that. But when you can see, the real live thriving of a business or a product, it's so fun.
Yeah. Did anybody else want to add on to that question about what's the most exciting part about being an entrepreneur?
I would say what Cheryl was saying is that it's absolute freedom in some ways. You know, everything you do is ultimately you. Yeah, you might have to like rely on other people to get those things rolling after you've initiated it or somebody started initiating it with you. But really, at the end of the day, it's yours, and anything that happens is yours, and that's exciting. And what Anthony was saying earlier is, I like when all the best when I have that pressure. If I'm allowed to just kind of go with the flow, I will. I'll totally just hang out and that's it. Right. And it kind of forces that. And I love it.
Anthony, did you have anything to share on that topic as well?
I think it's almost been said, but I mean, I think it's it really kind of comes back to a similar point around it's the exhilaration, right, that you get when you are a part of something that's that you've been a part of building, right? And so I think when you can build something and it becomes successful, and maybe it started off as an idea, maybe it started off as you were some part of something early, and you see that grow and you see that develop, and you know that you were there and you made a difference, and it was your hard work that went into that. Of course, there are other people, because there are always other people, but when you can sort of do that, it's just a rewarding, exhilarating feeling that I just don't know if other feelings in life sort of capture that sort of moment, right? It's very rewarding. And so that, I think, again, there are risks and there are rewards, but when you get the reward and you've built something and it's meaningful, then there's not many feelings like that.
Hey, yes, it looks like we have another hand raised. If you wanted to unmute yourself and ask your question, feel free.
Hi, my name is Amaya. My question is for those of you who were working like regular corporate jobs before you became entrepreneurs, are there any tips that you have from for transitioning from like a 9-to-5 to like going to like becoming an entrepreneur and being self-sufficient in that?
I mean, everyone's path is different. So I would say for me, it really helped that I worked in some really small companies after my corporate role. I learned a lot quickly, so in my first job, I kind of learned what I didn't want to be doing and the size of company I really didn't want to be in. And then after that, every company I worked for was small. And so I got to work with senior leadership at a young age. And I always think of it like a crash course. And so I learned from them. And when I wasn't learning anymore, I moved on and worked with someone else. And I, just tried to be a sponge and learn as much about business as I could from all different angles, so that when it came time to do something on my own, I knew enough. Obviously, I needed partners that had other expertise, but I knew enough that I was comfortable to ask the right questions, be a part of the conversation, know what I'm looking for. So for me, it was getting some experience first before jumping in. Of course, I know other entrepreneurs that, started, whether they were in college starting a business or right after college, and they just jump right in. And so I think everyone's path is different. It sort of depends on, do you already have an idea? And in that case, my recommendation is get lots of feedback early before you take it too far. There's lots of time to learn from others and get their feedback. And if you don't, and you're just thinking one day you want to run something or be a part of running something, then I suggest getting as much experience hands-on as you can and learning as best you can.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So for me, I think about the experiences that I had, and I worked at some big companies and some small companies, but I think out of business school, I actually worked at an investment bank. And so literally my schedule was I would work maybe 20 hours a day, and not a lot of sleep. And so it taught me that it really taught me that you could work like that. I don't know if anyone wants to work like that, but you could work like that. And it taught me a lot about structure and organizations and building culture. And so I think those things are very important. Also, I knew that I wanted to move into venture capital. And so it gave me some great relationships. And so it's really good to have an end game, even, sort of when you're in a big company or any company, right? And so that way you think about what you want out of that experience. And so you're not just sort of kind of breezing through, but you're looking for certain things, right? It's sort of, can you contribute? Can you make relationships? Because you should be building relationships at every step of the way, right? From college to your jobs to at every level, because those relationships, while you may not value them today, they will always be valuable for you, right? No matter what you do. It could be your next job. It could be raising money for your company. It could be your next partner, your next co-founder. It could be anything. You just never know. And so just build those relationships. That's probably the most important thing. And then I think when you're working in different environments, really get a sense of the culture, like what works, what doesn't work, what do you like, what do you not like, right? And then push yourself, right? Because I think Cheryl talked about this before, lots of big companies, like there are 5 different layers to get anything done, right? And so navigate that, right? And then say, I got it done, right? If it were my company, I'd do it a little differently, right? But I got it done, right? And so again, learn from every experience that you have, but also take note of what is invigorating for you and what you want to see different down the road and what you want to get out of that situation.
Yeah, Corey, did you have anything to add about that?
I skipped the whole corporate world thing. I have teal hair after all. So I mean, I don't, not to be a hypocrite with what I said earlier, but I actually, some of the things that I miss a lot is working those other jobs, because they are actually an easy way of just getting to know other people. Right now, it's every single interaction I make is actually like, that's part of the job. Which isn't true if you are doing that 9 to 5 or something. It just kind of happens. It's an organic thing. And right now, a lot of those connections are not organic. And I do miss, that's probably the thing I would miss the most. And I think I kind of took that for granted and didn't want to do that anymore. But like, I miss that. And I think if that is what you're doing, you should kind of take that in and feel that out.
I guess a question I personally have to add on to what Amaya said, and actually more your response, Anthony, is a lot of times when we hold these events, networking is super important, and we talk about that. But how do you, when you make a connection, then how do you maintain that connection? Especially in the professional world. I don't know if Anthony, if you want to answer that, Cheryl.
Yeah, I mean, I think for some people it's natural and some people it's not, right? When it's not natural, you have to make sure that you're intentional about it, right? And I think it's really just being yourself, right? And so oftentimes it's if you find someone to be interesting, like have coffee, right? It's talk about what you are doing, right? Dinner, right? And so what are you up to? How are you doing it? How are you thinking about it? What books are you reading, right? And it's literally not just you should be doing that with your peers, but also your bosses, your boss's boss. And so, I think most people will talk to you when you talk to them, right? They will answer your questions if you ask them questions. And I think showing that initiative goes a really long way. It's something that I think some people think, oh, she's too busy, he's too busy, right? But most people, if you show any interest, they will spend time with you. And so, particularly when you're a young person, right? And so I just think sometimes when you're young, you realize what you think, what do I have to say, right? How do I say it? And this is something I try to coach my kids on all the time. Like, it doesn't matter much, right? Like, get 3 or 4 questions, and they can be the same questions, but ask your questions, just show interest, and people will lead you, they will guide you, they will talk to you, right? And so it's very important that, again, you do that. And I think, again, when you're in college, it's easy. When you start your first or second job, it's pretty easy. It gets harder along the way, but if you keep doing it, keep reaching out, and again, like, and sometimes I think we live in a world of text today, but also pick up the phone, right? I say, how are you doing? And it could be a 5-second conversation, right? But you've made contact, and that's really all you have to do, and keep doing it. And the more you do it, the easier it gets.
I mean, I agree. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I use, if anybody knows Discord, I use Discord all the time for everything I do. And sometimes I'll just like hit somebody up and be like, hey, you want to like sit down and just like have a face-to-face for a second? I have this idea, or I wanted to talk to you about this thing, or I saw something you did. Usually I try to like root it in them first and then kind of go from there. And I saw your stream the other day and I love this idea. Hey, can we actually talk about like how'd you get there or something? And so many people will just be like, yeah, you want to just like have a drink and sit on Discord for a little? I'm like, yeah. That super easy to do in my where I am, which is totally different than corporate stuff.
Yeah, Cheryl, did you have something to add on to that as well?
Really different. We can move on. I mean, I would be echoing a lot of what Anthony said. So I did a lot of head nodding as he was talking.
Okay. Looks like we have another hand raised. Akshat, if you want to unmute yourself, if ask.
I'm Akshat. I'm a sophomore. So I just wanted to ask, like all of you, that what do you enjoy the most about starting on your own? What are some things you enjoy the most?
Can you repeat the question one more time, Akshat?
Yeah, sorry. I mean, what do you enjoy the most about starting on your own?
Yeah, I think we touched a little bit on it earlier, but for me personally, it's that excitement and that payoff that you get that I don't necessarily think that you get from just kind of receiving your orders and fulfilling them. There's that excitement about being the one that kind of gives the orders, even if it's only to yourself. I like that. Even if I revolt against myself sometimes too, it's fine.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the ability to be able to move fast and be nimble. And, oftentimes you start off with an idea and then you have to evolve it because either the idea maybe wasn't as good as you thought it was, or the world has changed, or, whatever else. And so it's great to be able to make those changes really quickly. And I personally enjoy that. I would struggle if I had an idea and I was working at a big company and I couldn't get that idea done. Like that would drive me crazy versus being able to work with a small group of people and react. I mean, when COVID hit and, I didn't touch on too much about what Mgemi is, but, we make Italian shoes and we sell them in the US, and COVID hit Italy first. And so all of our workshops shut down. And then all of a sudden, I don't know about everyone here, but most people weren't wearing shoes because they were working at home. And so there was less of a need, especially for, heels and dress shoes. And so we had to really quickly adapt, and we were able to because we just did it. We just decided what we needed to do, came up with a plan, and quickly took action. And that gave me comfort in a really uncomfortable time. And so in terms of what I love being able to make quick decisions and act on them.
If you don't mind me jumping in there, when COVID hit, I was actually, so I've started doing a lot of like consulting and moving things that are in a physical space into a digital space. And one of those is theater. And I was actually working at the time with Hoyo Community College to produce a show that we were going to set up cameras in the space, have an invited guest, just like you normally would. This is before COVID. We were actually going to stream it though. We were going to stream it on Twitch and do all of that. And then as we were in production, pre-production really for this, it was going to be a fully original play. COVID hit and the schools shut down and they couldn't do it anymore, but they still had online classes and all this. And they were like, well, what do we do? And we were like, we just stream it from everyone being in their own spaces. And we just move and we just switch that and swap that. And that was a huge, there was no delay. That season, we still were able to produce a show. And we changed a lot of what we had written to now kind of encapsulate this idea that everyone's stuck in boxes. And, we had green screen effects. We actually had two actors hug when they were not in physical spaces together. It was awesome. And that the fact that we were already starting on that and we were able to pivot so quickly was awesome. It was really great. And then theaters everywhere started doing it. Yeah.
All right, awesome. In that case, we actually have a question from an attendee. So Austin asks, when it's time to take action on an idea on a business, when it's time to, get that initial outreach to your posting, when it's time to get that first investment, how do you kind of take that first actionable step when, you quote unquote have nothing to show for it so far?
Well, I know from my perspective is everything I do is kind of an investment in that anyways. I'm a big proponent. We right now have access to the most people we've ever had access to in human history, right? You in a moment's notice, you can reach anybody pretty much across the world. And I don't know if we necessarily take advantage of that in the best ways, but we absolutely can. And for me, it's about already kind of trying to build up that thing so that when you do have an idea, you can just go and it'll already have that initial floor of support no matter what that thing is, whether it's a new business opportunity that you're trying to launch, you're selling products, or if you're just making new media or transitioning a play to be in digital space. Like we were able to, when we did do the consulting with Holyoke Community College, they were going to have 20 people there tops. Parents of the people acting in the show or family of the people acting in the show. But because I already had this established community or whatever, we were able to launch it to hundreds of people watching from all over the world. People in Germany were watching Holyoke Community College in Massachusetts do a show. Like that's unreal, right? So I think building up those brands before you even ever have that and just kind of using that, there's so many opportunities to do it. Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, like so many resources to build that up.
I think there are lots of ways to receive kind of a foundation in entrepreneurship these days, right? And so you could be a content creator, you could produce a product, you could have a service. And I think there are lots of books and classes and people, and you should sort of do all of that. But I think really the most important thing is to start it, to do it, right? No matter how small you think it is, you start it, you do it, you get feedback from your friends, your family, some people that are supportive of you, and then you continue to broaden that network. And I think, what Corey talked about in terms of the reach that you have today, right? It's probably broader than I even understand, right? Quite honestly, because I think the way in which your generation communicates is even different than sort of certainly all the tools that I had, right? I mean, we sort of work in those environments, but that's not how we were that was not our framework in those developmental stages, right? And so, I'll give you an example. I was actually traveling to Ethiopia for a conference, and a colleague of mine, younger, kind of late 20s, early 30s, arranged for me to meet with entrepreneurs literally in Ethiopia. And so I had a wonderful meeting with about 12 entrepreneurs in Ethiopia that I'd never met before, didn't know anything about, and that was primarily through Instagram. And so I think the power of your network and reach today is vast, right? So you have to be willing and open to use it. You have to be willing to sort of get off the dime and keep it, and not keep it sort of so close to your chest. I think a lot of times when people start off, they think they have this wonderful idea that someone's going to steal. It's really not about your idea, right? It's about how well you can execute, how quickly you can move, how quickly you can garner the resources to make that idea into something real. Because otherwise it'll just be your idea, right? And it won't, it's not worth a lot, right? But to the extent that you can get off the dime, garner the resources, put some passion into it, some elbow grease, move it from idea to reality, then that's when you know whether you have something or not.
And then Cheryl, unless you want to chime in on that, we actually have 3 more questions in the chat. So prepare
Go
yourself.
right ahead.
All right, thank you, Cheryl. Yeah, so our next question comes from Lynn. She wants to know, do you need to go to grad school to start your own business? Or can you become an entrepreneur through a non-traditional route? And if so, how? And I'm sure Corey is dying to pipe up.
Yeah, you don't need grad school at all. I don't think. I mean, maybe if you're talking about these multi-million-dollar businesses but even then, I don't necessarily think so. I think that if you have the passion and the want, the need actually to execute on that, I think you can do it. Grad school just kind of maybe teaches you how, like, the most efficient ways to do that. But I think your failing is going to teach you how to do that too, which also I would say that if you are a business major or going to school for business, take a theater class or 2, because they really do help out in that way of actually, like, kind of understanding how people think and like kind of understanding how people are feeling about certain things. And sounds manipulative, but you can use that to your advantage. People want something for themselves too, right? And that's kind of what any business is selling that to people.
That's really interesting. So I'm somewhat of, I would call myself an introvert. And so the first few times that I needed to get up and speak in front of a group, or I was once on a news program live, I was in a total panic. And I remember my PR person saying to me, "You're in the wrong industry, like you're in the wrong role. What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, I need to figure this out." Right. I think that public speaking is so important. Being able to, whether you're in a group or you're in front of an investor, like that is an interesting way to think about it, because how you present, what you say, it is part of the whole story of putting the package together and how to think about what you're trying to do. And so I never thought of it that way, but I do think that that's interesting. And, back to the original question, I didn't go to grad school. There are times that I say, oh, that might have been helpful, that there are certain things that my peers learned in business school, getting their MBA, that I did not have. But like I said earlier, you surround yourself with the pieces that you don't have. And so I knew that I always needed to have by my side really strong financial and strategic planning as part of, my team. And so I don't think that you have to go to business school. I think that it's definitely helpful, but not critical. I think it also depends on the industry that you're in. Obviously, there are some businesses that won't hire you unless you do. So, getting that background, if you can do it and you have the time to do it, I think it's great, but you don't have to.
So I guess as the sole MBA on the panel, I don't think it's not mandatory, right? I mean, you can sort of look at the successful entrepreneurs, both small, one-person operations to multi-billion-dollar operations. You'll have people that don't have MBAs, right? I think for me, it was useful because I have a degree in computer science, and so I didn't have. While I've always thought of myself as entrepreneurial, I didn't have the language of business per se, right? And so I think that's something that you do have to learn depending upon sort of what business you move into and what type of entrepreneurship you move into. And so for me, I wanted to move into, again, venture capital and finance-related activities. And so it was critical for me to make that sort of transition. I could have made it otherwise, but it would not have been as easy. And also in terms of investors and raising capital and a host of things, it has really given me a platform to do that and credibility, quite frankly. And so again, you can always do without it, and also relationships. I mean, some of my early investors were business school classmates. I mean, when we started a venture fund, it was literally a classmate of mine that was my first investor in that venture fund and helped me get some deals done. So, it's really the skill set, but it's also the relationships. And I think that's like anything, right? And of course, there are ways to develop those things without it, but if you can do it and you remain focused, then I think it can be an asset. Now, some people go to business school and they get caught up in sort of large companies and they never get back to their entrepreneurial sort of pursuits or dreams. And that happens as well. And so again, it really depends on you and what you want to accomplish. And each individual person is unique in that regard.
And with that said, I do want to go back to school to get my master's in business now, because like I feel like I have that foundation. I want to know so much more about the business world, and I'm so excited about learning more. And those connections are so important. That to me was what college was about anyways, was always connections. And yeah, maybe you'll learn some stuff, I guess, but it was mostly about like, who am I finding, and like, who are these people, and we all kind of have similar experiences and kind of, can push each other on certain things too. So yeah.
Awesome. With that, yeah, we'll go to our next question from chat. This one is from Avi. They were wondering, let's say that you have a great idea. Let's say it's, in a kind of technological world like AI or hardware, but you don't necessarily have the expertise to execute it. They're just wanting for advice on how to proceed from there. If you really think you have a great idea, but you don't necessarily have the expertise or the know-how of how to really put into action.
I mean, I figure it out. I know that sounds crazy, right? But like, we have so, like, it goes with we have so much access to so many things and so many people that, if you really have what you feel is a good idea, start with that base, figure out who knows what they're talking about in that space, and figure out how maybe you can connect them in on that, but also start kind of learning and going down that route. If you don't know anything about AI or anything, then maybe your idea has already been done, or maybe somebody else is on the cusp of doing it, or, there's so many things that could go in on that. App development is huge too, right? Like I know I was looking into app development for stuff, and I was like, I don't know anything about app development. Come to find out, there's like 20 apps, the thing I was thinking. And I was like, so yeah, I would say just kind of try to figure that out. There's so many different places too, so many different resources that you might be able to check into. You're at, I don't know if everyone here is a student or not, but you have so many resources right there if you're at school right now. Like that is where your resources are right now. And if you don't have that connection, somebody around you, somebody does. And this is your place to find out, is while you're in school and while you're there.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo a lot of what Corey just said. I think I don't know what your background is. I would, I mean, if you have an AI or hardware related question, I assume that you have studied computer science or electrical engineering or something like that. Maybe not. But I would start with professors, right, who are sort of on campus adjunct professors. Maybe they have some real world experience. Maybe they've developed some products. Talk to them. And so, I mean, when I wanted to get into venture capital, I had a professor at NYU that had been in the business, and he became my best friend. I mean, not literally, but I spent a lot of time talking to him and picking his brain, and he was very open to that conversation. And is still a mentor today. And so again, this kind of gets back to an earlier point. I think when you show interest, when you have an idea and you're willing to expose yourself to people, they are oftentimes very willing and open to guide you and point you in the right direction and give you advice. So I think that's the first place to start, and then sort of go from there in terms of trying to develop a prototype, right? Like, does it really work, right? Do research on, does it already exist? Doesn't exist, like, how is yours different, right? And so it's literally rolling up your sleeve and trying to make it happen. And I think there are enough sort of ways, if you're talking about sort of hardware to, 3D printing, right? Maker spaces, right? Where you can actually develop a pretty solid prototype for not a lot of money these days, just to sort of test your idea. And so I think it's sort of getting that prototype in place, locating professors that are in that industry, and then alums that may be working in the space already. And so I think those are three things that you need to really do to sort of get going.
Yeah, that was a great response, everyone. Thank you. Yeah, so we have 10 minutes left. So just to frame it, we have this one question which I'm going to ask you next. But if anyone has one last question, shoot it my way and we'll try and fit it in. But panelists, just so you know, we got 10 minutes left. So if you want to, take your time answering this one, feel free to go ahead. So the question from Anath is, they were wondering, how do you handle the financial risk early in the early days of the business? And they say, especially when you consider insurance and daily expenses. And I know you guys talked about this a little, but I was especially interested to hear from Cheryl, seeing as, with MGME, I'm sure there's a lot of startup and planning that went into it.
So that is the hardest part, I think, that, and I think that's partially why Anthony said, start early, take risks when you're young. You have less financial responsibilities than you will as you get older. But, we went down a path of venture capital. There's lots of different ways to fund a business. Oftentimes people use family or an angel investor, but finding a way to get some financial support to help you get off the ground is obviously most helpful. There's always risk. And, I think that if you're risk averse, it's not the right industry. But like we've all said, we've been there, we've succeeded, we've failed, we've tried, we've taken the risk. And, someone said it earlier, have a good support system. Sometimes it's not the right time, and that's okay too. Or find someone that's a good partner that you can work with and they can help you make it happen. And it's really just about surrounding yourself with the right people for the right industry. For me, finding the venture teams that we worked with was what got us off the ground. Then it's up to us to execute and execute fast, because that won't last. So, I keep using the same words, but being nimble, being quick, taking action, you don't have a lot of time. So, you want to get going and minimize the risk as best you can.
Yeah, these two are going to know way more about this than I do, but I come from like a little bit of a not cynical standpoint of it, but I've always been taught that because of acting, that humans are selfish and we only speak if we want something. The only time a human is ever going to say anything is because there is something tangible or something that we want. We want an effect. We wanted something to happen, whatever that is. And one of the things that I learned pretty early on was go to people that have that money and make it worth their while. Think of how you can get their money, what's in it for them, and odds are, if they have it, they'll give it. If they see a way that they can get something from it, most people are going to do it. Especially if you already have like a proof of concept or something that well, it's already bringing in money. And this is how I think it can benefit you, or, hey, this opportunity is going to lead to growth of that thing you're working on, or whatever that is, which is a lot of how I got started, was being like, hey, I don't have any money. I am so broke, but hey, I have this idea and I have this audience. What do you think? And people will pay for that. I remember I hired a consultant. This is one of the worst things I've ever done. I went on Upwork and I hired a consultant for like $1,500 to give me a quick little like, hey, this is what I think you can do to grow your brand, blah, blah, blah. And it was awful. And it was like a copy pasted thing that they used for somebody else. But it was the best thing I ever did, because I learned anybody can be a consultant. So you could just that was the best thing, because that guy did no work at all. And I had to pay that. And he was very reputable. And I was like, great. So the thing that I learned is I can do consulting now. And I was able to jump into that, and it was one of the best things I've ever done. So look for those hidden opportunities, I think.
So I think both, I love what both Cheryl and Corey just said. For me, it was, I think it's really about sort of creating a plan, right? I think the fact that Cheryl was able to attract venture capital is unique. It says something about her and her tenacity and capabilities, because everyone's not able to attract venture capital. It's hard, right? And so I think when you're starting something, you have to if you think that something's you're gonna get some revenue or capital within 6 months, maybe it's 18 months, literally, right? And so you need to sort of create your lifestyle around not having significant capital for that 18 months. So whatever that means, right? So if that's saving, if that's reducing your expenses, because when you literally have run out of capital, then you have a problem. You have to do something different, right? And so you have to take your eye off the ball, right? And so I think it's really about creating a plan where you have the resources to survive the startup period and phase. It's a very challenging thing. So people often talk about it, but I think until you are living in it, it's hard to comprehend. And so I think that's why I say start that early, because when you have a family and you told your partner that this thing is going to kick off in 12 months and it's 24 months and 36 months and you still believe and no one else does, like that's a hard conversation, right? And so do it as early as possible, because again, when you're an entrepreneur, you actually continue to do it. It never stops, really, right? It really never stops. But hopefully you just have more of a nest egg and cushion to sort of weather it longer. That's all.
And like that part sucks too, because I've been there where it's like I don't even have that cushion. Like I don't have that space. And if you want it bad enough, I mean, I hate to say it, but you figure it out. I lived off of eggs and rice for a year when I was like starting off. Like that's what I ate. That's it. And I was the worst. All of my money was going to rent, and I realized, you know what? I'm gonna get a roommate that literally lives in my room, because I was like, and you gotta figure it out.
Mhm.
Those are some incredible responses, incredible questions. I think we'll start wrapping it up here. Kate will be sharing one of our slides. Thank you all for joining us once again. This concludes our Sharing Alumni Advice Wednesday. Please be sure to follow us on all social media platforms. If you're interested in more events like this one, we'll be having another one of these events next month. It'll be SAA Wednesday regarding careers in the healthcare fields. And one thing we want to mention before you leave tonight, especially if you're a student or if you're an alumni, is we have this new resource called Connect UMass. You're probably familiar with Handshake, you're familiar with LinkedIn. Connect UMass is an incredible service where it's an online platform where there's only UMass alumni and UMass students, additionally with UMass professors as well. So everybody you're connecting with on there all have some sort of allegiance to UMass. You can learn some really interesting things, connect with super interesting alumni on that platform. I believe Sam has sent a link. Yep, he sent a link in the chat to register for it or take a look at it. So please be sure to do so. But that is all from us tonight. Thank you all for your incredible questions. Panelists, thank you so much for your time. And that is all from us. Thank you so much.
Well, I just want to say thank you. Appreciate everybody organizing this. Cheryl, I'd love to pick your brain at some point down the road.
That would be great.
All right. Thanks,
Nice
everyone.
to meet everyone. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.